Well, we made some notations here, and there are some things that we need to solidify, and there are some additional changes that are on the table that, may or may not be made. So, how are we going to close that gap? I don't know. Do you know?
No, I'd say everything's on the table.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would been trying to articulate this, and I don't know if I'm making any sense, but if we submit expenses for reimbursement this year, we can get a 60% match on whatever we would put or next year to the pension. Once that year has elapsed, I asked this question, like with income tax, you can go back and file an amended return, but it's my understanding with expenses for salary and things, you cannot do that. So if we miss the opportunity, that $4.5 million ARC that's projected would become 100% our liability, where if we budget that as part of the whatever we do, it would become 60% reimbursable. So a millage rate to cover our share would seem like a prudent investment for not just us, but for the citizens at large so that we are economically stable and viable, and that we do not fall below the 70 percentile in funding. We would have to raise the percent to get the full 4.5 million. We'd have to pay it and then get reimbursed, but still,
right,
it would be a
Bob.
net.
Is that right, Bob?
Yeah, we would get approximately 60% back. Yeah,
But don't you have to pay it before?
but we have to
in order-
pay it
Yeah,
first,
so
right?
you'd have to.
Before
Plus-
the end of the
plus
year?
also
But
short- that
I
could
just
cover the
see if
increase on
doing
that side.
nothing is putting us further into the hole. If we think about the math, we can manage it and make ourselves whole again. It would take a long time at $500,000 a year, but we can't keep sliding further back. If we
No,
stop the
it-
bleeding, put
It'll
on the
never happen at
tourniquet,
500,000 a year,
No.
right? We all know that.
Well,
That's
um,
not-
It's
it could take
10% of the ARC.
yes, it could take 10 to 20 years, but, it can happen.
You pay the ARC 1 year, you're not gonna incur, the following year, you're not, and say the market goes up, we may actually see that number come down quite
And when you
significantly.
just say that number, if you pay the ARC and it's $4.5 million.
Right.
Then you
Right.
have to pay that.
But we
You
have to pay.
it, correct, you have to pay it in before we can
Get
ask
it
for
back.
reimbursement.
But we
correct.
will get it back.
But you have to
Is it
Put
40?
the money in.
We gotta
first
run
So you
it
and
have to
bill
come
it
up
out.
with that much,
Yeah.
and also the gap that we have on the budget.
Right.
So,
So we're looking
But
at
to do nothing
7.
means that we become 100% liable versus 40%
I'm not,
liable.
I'm just asking
Yeah.
what the number, the magic number
I'm
sounds to me like.
I'm just pointing out that
7.5
it's
million.
not prudent to ignore it.
Oh, no, I agree, it's not prudent to ignore, but
Well, I think the difference between what you're saying and Commissioner Litz is saying is you're including the whole arc,
Which is
and
reimbursable.
and she's including only the
percentage, the net.
percentage of
But she
the
can't-
40%.
She can't do that because we have to raise the money to pay.
We have to pay
Right,
it, and
we
then
have to
when
pay
when
it
it's
in first,
comes
and
back,
then get
billed,
it back.
when it's billed to the agencies for that 60% that you're talking about, that only happens the following year.
If we would put
Or
the
the same
money
year.
in next year, we would bill them next year.
And when would it come back? Would it come back the same year?
Bill them based on.
Paying the 14 arc, getting paid until the end of 14, I don't see an agency,
Well,
a
it depends.
reimbursing
It
agency.
depends when we pay it. Like when we paid the 500,000 the other year, we billed them that year for it.
But it's paid on payroll, okay? It's
Yeah.
It's based on payroll, based on
Right.
the portion of the person's payroll that is pension, and that doesn't play out until the last day of the year. So you can't, unless
Yeah.
you're otherwise you're projecting and anticipating what
Oh,
to pay, and
okay,
that's
I
not an
got you.
actual.
So you're not really gonna get it back until 15.
First year, we would have to front the entire amount. After that, then
Then
we
it
could
would
drop
start.
it back.
Then it would start coming back.
Then it would, yeah.
And the advantage to putting the money, if we make a full arc, the next year, if the market continues to stay the way it go up, the actual arc should be, the arc for the year, I'm just saying the year, should go down. We would still owe a percentage of what we haven't paid in the past. That would be amortized over, I think, 20 years or 15 years. So you'd always have, if you had 20 million left, you might still start with a base of 2 million. But it would be then it would only be whatever the difference might be for that year, but it could be lower going forward.
Just, brainstorming, the only other option would be to put a bond issue for the amount that the first year, and then pay it back when the reimbursement comes. Does that make sense?
Could be,
It's an option.
could work that way. Bottom line is to get to where you wanna do, you have to put the money in first to
Right,
get
that's
to
the
the
rub.
end result.
That's the challenge. Well, 2.6 is it now?
Where were we? 2.6.
2.6.
We're still gonna
6.37.
get, we still have some work to do on
Right,
that.
but about half, no, 1.5 of that is Cedar Haven cash.
Yeah.
500 would come off if the lawsuit is won.
If the arbitration appeal is one, right?
Which we hope we find out before budget closes,
Yeah,
right.
which could happen.
It could,
Not yet.
So that would come down to some.
but I say if we lose that, sold.
When you say everything's on the table, I mean, obviously, tax increase would be one option. I haven't heard anything about personnel options. But when you say everything's on the table, that's kind of implied. Cutting,
Not high on the list, really. We made a few, you were here for a few things that we did. Opted not to replace open
I
positions.
don't want to make assumptions, wrong assumptions based on when you say everything's on the table.
I was not thinking personnel when I said that,
Okay.
because I think we've done that pretty, to a pretty strong extent all that. I was thinking more other options such as cash to close it, some more expense things, and T-word.
Are you handling the Cedar Haven situation under personnel? Is that one of the issues you
No.
discussed?
That wasn't what I was thinking when I just mentioned it now.
No, there are a couple of more firms to be scheduled, so that continues, I think. I don't want to speak for them, but that will continue to be an open process as far as I
Yeah,
can see.
I don't see us having a closed-door session to make that decision. Do you?
No,
You?
By the sounds of things, you also, it doesn't seem as though this is going to be a situation that is settled by the end of this budget process.
I don't see how it could be. What we're hoping is to have the appeal settled, but we don't have much control over that.
And there's a negotiation that's just begun also for the contract there. Very early.
Do you see any way that you can get out of this without raising taxes?
I don't. It's not my favorite thing to think about, but I really don't see it.
There's a way we could do it, and I hate to use this expression because we hear it all the time in national news, but, we could continue to kick this can down the road. What I would like to see is have us make a decision that's going to improve the financial situation in the county, not make it worse. Yes, is there a way to do it without a tax increase? I think we could. But I don't think it's a good solution. I just don't. And believe me, I didn't make the mistake. I never said to anyone that I would never raise taxes during a term as county commissioner. Laura LeBeau put me on that spot the day I announced my candidacy, and she said, because I spoke against raising taxes, and I still feel strongly that way, and I think we're all overtaxed. I really believe that. I think we're outrageously overtaxed, and the last thing in the world I want to do is to make a decision to make that burden worse for the people in Lebanon County. At least, at this level, we're also doing things to control the spending. The federal government spends more and taxes more and spends more and taxes more. We're at least, you guys have those budgets. You saw people that actually brought their budgets down from last year, and I think that's an incredible accomplishment for department heads to do today. And I don't know if we're really are coming up with a long-term solution to this problem.
or more or less timeline understanding, when you're talking about the options at Cedar Haven, realistically, does that decision really impact this budget? Or is it more maybe next year's budget in terms of if you went with a management contract, if you went with an out-and-out sale, that's a big process that takes a long time. You need to operate that this year, or 2014, so.
I do, I mean, that's realistically I don't know how you would do anything other than count on something if it was gonna happen for 15. As
Even
far as
if
an
we
impact.
brought if we decided to bring a management company in, it might impact the spending, the actual spending, or the next year's budget that we're already budgeting now. It may have an impact on that. There might be a savings generated, but I don't think we're close to even making that decision. We're still gathering information, and I'm sure there's going to be more feedback from the community that will impact all of us making those decisions going forward. So,
Have you gotten a sizable amount of feedback from the community?
no, I haven't.
You find that surprising?
I do find it somewhat, but I also think that you guys got the word out that we are in the exploratory phases, that we are trying to find ways to save Cedar Haven, not sell or, pass it. So I think that word has gotten out to the public that we are doing an earnest effort here to continue the program down there as it is. And so that may be why, although I guess the number one group would be the pensioners that we've gotten feedback from because of the $11 million deficit down there in the pension, and they're living and counting on that money, and that needs to be in their heads something that is a solvent program. So that might be why from the education, we're not through the educational part of this, and maybe that's why the pensioners are a little bit more nervous than the others.
Well, they're getting bad information. They've been told
That's
that
true,
if we would sell Cedar Haven, they'd lose their pension, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So they were the few that came to the meeting here were mainly employees, a few residents, but the employees have the biggest concern, and rightfully so. But I think their concern has to be tempered with accurate information. Some parties out there that feel they might benefit by giving bad information, so they do that.
Are there any other assets the county has, whether it's land or buildings or anything that might be on the auction block, so to speak? I know in the past, before you were on board, the city.
We do have one parcel that we've had interest in from time to time, and that's down there, kind of the wetland area. I don't know how else to put it, but
Behind the driver's center.
yeah.
The land, the tillable land there that has any value. I don't think the wetland area.
No, but I just meant in that general area. Sometimes we get an interest there that commercial entities would like to purchase it, but nothing has ever happened. Well, I think protecting that wetland is critical to the flooding that occurs in a city. We can't let anyone impinge on that. It's the beginning, it's the headwaters to the Quittapahilla Creek. And to let that get macadamed, or filled in, or we just can't do that. We have to be good stewards of that land.
Well, we wouldn't have control over that anyhow. I mean, that would be controlled by the zoning ordinances and things like that. So we couldn't make a decision to sell it and say, hey, you can put a parking lot
Well,
there.
but I think that it's the marketability of that parcel depends
Is
on the
affected by
floodplain.
Right.
Floodplain on probably a third of that lower,
Right.
part is floodplain, so that when we have had interest, and it's been a
Yes.
long time, I'm gonna say it's 7 or 8 years
Yeah.
since anyone's even asked about it, the only way to make that work would be access almost through where the driver's center is right now to the portion that has some more elevation.
The point is that
That's a wrong
to allow the 2/3 that's not in the floodplain to become macadamed and rooftops would add to the flood zone. So in my mind, really we should protect that parcel, even though it has commercial value along 422, so to speak.
I'll summarize.
Bake sale it is.
Bake sale.
Yeah, that's
Car
Angel
wash,
could, yeah,
car
we
wash.
might run a bake sale.
The county doesn't own any utilities, the parcels that we own largely contain county offices, that are in use.
The only
We
other
just
thing.
bought a house, but we bought that for a reason, to save the county money.
Liquid fuels, that was one
Yeah.
too.
The only other thing I could think of as a revenue generator would be is if we could sell, I think we own a couple of towers, not a lot, we rent a lot, but if we could sell more satellites on the towers that we do own, that would be one way to generate some revenue. We need a marketing firm, yes.